If you're a newcomer to Tekken 8, first of all, welcome. In the FGC, there are so many controllers to pick from, and it can be overwhelming to choose with so much advice out there. So I want to give you all the info you need to decide which controller is the best for you as a Tekken player. On the right here, I've listed specific Tekken techniques ranging from beginner to advanced techniques. These won't be like full-blown tutorials, but I want to show how hard or easy each of these techniques are with each device. We're going to go technique by technique and rate every device. Timestamps will be below for each technique, so feel free to jump around as needed. First, let's take a look at the controller lineup. We have both PS5 and Xbox controllers. I really picked the best way to cover that up. PS5 and Xbox controllers. The main difference between these two is that the pad, the D-pad here, is soft on the DS5. The DualSense 5. And it's kind of imprecise for some people, but it's really comfortable to move between directions. And in Tekken, you're going to do a lot of changing directions rather than like Street Fighter motion inputs. The Xbox one is really, really precise. It's a clicky D-pad, so you really know which direction you're hitting at any time. But the downside is jumping between directions can be kind of a lot of movement for the thumb. I thought this was going to be a useless controller, but as I was preparing for this video, it ended up being pretty viable. Next, Razer sent me their Kitsune. So this is a half review, not a sponsored video, but I want to give my honest take on not just the Kitsune, but leverless controllers in general. It's already unboxed, so none of that. Finally, two more sticks. Quanba sent me their Obsidian 2. Brand new stick here. I've kept it completely stock, so you can see that this is the Japanese lever it comes with and the stock buttons. So I want to review a bit of how the stick works. Again, we'll go through each technique for the Japanese lever. While we're here, the one thing I don't like about this stick, I like everything about it, except getting the cable door out involves untwisting these two screws, and that kind of takes forever. And once you actually get it off, this cable compartment is so tiny. So actually getting the cable in is a bit of a nightmare. That's my only gripe with it, though. Aside from that, it's beautiful, it's heavy, which makes some techniques easier to execute, and the buttons are really well placed up here. So it is a candidate to be my tournament stick. I just hate the idea of being on stage and fumbling with this thing when I've lost and I'm like nervous and I'm shaking, like, oh my god. All right. And the last stick we're using is the Quanba Titan. Again, not a sponsored video. I want to just give my take on it. This is not stock. I've put a Korean lever in here. What's important to note is almost every Korean lever will work, except this one. My Korean lever is extra thick, so I had to 3D print a new base to keep their weight plate here and mount it on the outside. Very extreme. For 99% of you, this won't be an issue, but covering our bases, okay? Some modification may be needed. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't mention keyboard players. And that's because for keyboard players, you can mostly just follow the advice for the leverless controller. The one thing that I've found in a lot of my viewers who are in chat is that they map the spacebar to up, because on the leverless controller, this bottom button is up. And that allows you to use all the hitbox style or leverless style techniques in the almost exact same way. The one advice I have is that if you're a keyboard player, try to float your wrist. Don't plant it down when you're typing. Tekken's a really high APM game, and I know a lot of people who are having wrist pain learning on keyboard. So if you can get the keyboard on your lap, that's probably optimal. Otherwise, like, raise your seat and try to float that wrist. Through all of these devices, your number one priority, in my opinion, should be to pick the device that doesn't hurt to play on. You know, you only got two hands. So that's enough of trying to be your dad. Let's get into this video finally. Tekken techniques by every controller. You see the catalog of techniques here. You can skip around as needed, and then we're going to make a little tier list when we're done of each technique, or each device on each technique. First things first, everybody's favorite, the Korean backdash. Certainly my favorite. I have a little note here, 1P versus 2P on stick. I'm going to talk about that. I have a full guide on this that I recommend checking out if you want to learn how to actually Korean backdash, but again, I'm just here to talk about the nuances. So, Dragunov, chill out, bro. Just trying to get my controller. PS5 pad, traditionally straightforward to backdash on. I'm using my thumb to bounce between the inputs here without moving it too much. On the player 2 side, my trick here is I am kind of using my right hand to grip most of the pad and then massaging across that diagonal. So because if I'm holding with my right hand more, I can have a really light touch with this hand. In general, I recommend not tensing up your hands. For all of these devices, that's super, super important. I'm kind of rubbing across the corner here with very, very little effort. A lot of people say their thumbs get really sore on pad. Take it slow, nail your inputs, and be really gentle with your hands. And ultimately, you'll be able to play longer and be more precise that way. Xbox pad, notoriously known as a nightmare, I was actually able to figure out how to backdash on this thing. I didn't think it was possible. And I'm still kind of sloppy on it, to be honest. But it's very doable. It's definitely possible. The one caveat I mentioned in the beginning is that it's hard to move between forward and back, right? There's just so much distance to cover here because it's only really actionable on the outside. You can like push in the middle, but you don't have as much like precise control. Showing you on the player 2 side, it's going to be the same thing as the PS4 where you kind of massage that corner, but because the switches are clicky, it's a bit easier to tell. So personally, I thought this was going to be terrible, but once I got used to the Xbox pad, I'm kind of enjoying it more than the PS5 pad. I know, it might be blasphemy. Let's check out the leverless controller. Razer Kitsune. Matte finish, kind of picks up fingerprints, and it's really hard to wipe it off. But this is a really comfortable stick. So, again, in my Korean backdash guide, I talk about which techniques you should probably use for Tekken to learn the backdash. There's a lot available, but I think there are certain optimal ones. I use the SOCD on the left side. You can probably hear that through the mic. And then on the right side, I just do it manually. I use my individual fingers and put in the inputs manually. I also learned how to do it manually on the player 1 side. But doing these techniques and all of the techniques in the list in general, your ring finger is going to need to develop coordination and endurance. Don't push too hard, keep a light tension, and take care of your hands. I'm going to be saying that the whole video. If you're tired of that by now, sorry. Quanba Obsidian 2 Japanese stick. If you don't know the difference, the Japanese stick has a spring, the Korean stick has a rubber. They bounce a bit differently. Why that matters is that the Japanese stick is really, really nice and precise, but it doesn't bounce back as quickly. The other downside, or, you know, upside, depending on how you feel about it, is that doing backdashing on the player 1 versus the player 2 side on stick is different. On the player 2 side, you only have your hand to coordinate the entire movement. On the player 1 side, you have all your fingers. So usually people can backdash faster on player 1 than player 2. My recommendation, again, is using a light touch and really getting used to the movement as much as possible. If you nail your inputs, then you can start to play with it at any rhythm, at any pace, and never have any tension or pain. So the Korean lever is the main input device I use. It didn't swap sides. What the heck? This is the main device I use. And the main reason is that backdashing on the player 2 side is a bit easier. Compared to the Japanese stick, the rubber bounces back and pushes back against my hand a little faster. So it's really, really straightforward for me to get a really nice, fast backdash. Those are the main differences. Let's rate them, right? Let's rate these input devices. So when it comes to Korean backdashing specifically, I think the Korean lever is on the top. I seriously challenge a hitbox user to race me in a backdash race, and I think I will win on the player 1 side. Player 2 side up for debate. But I think the Korean lever is not only comfortable, it's intuitive, and it's easy to play for sustained hours, assuming you have like a medium light tension. Right below that, the leverless controllers are very, very good for backdashing. It's very straightforward. You get really good feedback because you're hitting buttons, so you can really tell if you're doing it right or wrong. Below that, I'm going to put the Xbox and the PS5 pad. They're not bad. The PS5 pad is actually very intuitive for backdashing, right? You just kind of, if some people learn it imprecisely, but are functional because it just kind of makes sense to put in the crouch while you're holding back and just move your fingers back and forth. So that's my take on that. And finally, at the very bottom, it's hard to say. I think the Japanese lever, where it falls short, is that 2-player side. It took me a really long time to really master doing the Korean backdash on the player 2 side. I'll demonstrate it one more time. On the player 2 side, getting this backdash just really comfortable when the spring isn't providing a lot of bounce back it's a task. It takes a lot to coordinate. And I have a lot of experience working on it, but I remember distinctly that this... Oh, thank you. Scene swap. Chat came in clutch. I remember distinctly that this was a hard motion to do. So I recommend... All of these devices are pretty good. Korean backdashing is kind of a core Tekken movement, But keep in mind, if you play on a Japanese stick, you'll have to put in a little more work. It's not the end of the world, though, because there are more techniques we have to go through. Next one right away is the instant while running. This one is really, really cool. I left some quick notes here in case you want to look, but instant while running has some interesting quirks. If you don't know what this is, it's where you hit forward, forward, forward really fast. Usually, when Dragunov runs at you, he can press 2 to do this big running move. However, instant while running 2 is doing it as quickly as possible without even starting up that run. If you hit forward, forward, forward really fast, you get it. And he gets these little blue sparks to show that you really nailed it. Again, on a Japanese or Korean lever, there's differences between the player 2 and player 1 side, right? On the player 2 side, we have our thumbs here to help coordinate this movement. But some people's thumbs might feel pain or tension trying to navigate it like this. This isn't always easy. So a tip I got was to actually just grip the stick as normal and float is the wrong word, kind of like wave your wrist like this. And if you're not a scrub, it actually makes the input a bit easier. See that? And this is way less tension than this, right? So again, listen to your body, find what works best, but I found this technique pretty cool and it made it easier. And then on the player 1 side, there's no shortcut. You have to push your hand and put your wrist back and forth really, really quickly. This technique is really annoying. And my only key advice is, again, don't introduce tension in your wrist. Just go slow and slowly get faster and faster. This technique takes time to build. Only one tiny tip. If you do the first forward and then the next 2 kind of faster, that seems to help for some reason. So instead of doing forward, forward, and then the third one, do forward and then 2 quick forwards. And for some reason, that helps a lot. I have no idea why. For the sake of completeness, I'll show it on the Korean lever, but again, this is gonna look pretty similar. The Korean rubber bounces back pretty quickly, so it's a bit more comfortable for me. And because the Korean levers use a bat top traditionally, I have a bit more grip when I'm doing this other wrist method. Right? So, little benefits on Korean versus Japanese lever. The other controllers are really straightforward. Whether or not you are using the player 1 or the player 2 side, you are just hitting one button 3 times. Right? And it can still be kind of hard, especially if you're new to like fighting games in general, or just new to Tekken, because most fighting games don't involve hitting the same direction multiple times. So, as with all the other input devices, take it slow. Don't tense up your hand. If anything, grip harder with the right hand just slightly so your left hand can really, really relax. And you're gonna mess this up a lot. It takes a lot to learn, but I learned it fresh for this video. I don't play Tekken on these controllers, and I learned it just for this video. So you can learn it in a pretty timely manner with the right technique. For completeness, here it is on leverless. This is actually probably my favorite. Because you can hear the buttons and really feel them, it's like you get extra feedback knowing that you did it right. And it's really satisfying hearing like the 3 clicks and then seeing the blue sparks and then messing it up 3 times while you're trying to demonstrate. This is a cool device. I'm enjoying that. I don't know if I'm going to switch entirely, but for some of these techniques, it's really fun. Let's rate the instant while running on this tier list. I think it's undebatable that these 3 devices are on the top. However, I'm going to put the hitbox slightly higher, the leverless slightly higher, just because of that feedback, and you can really feel and hear. The Xbox is also kind of like that, but it doesn't bounce back as quickly as the individual button does, even though these are clicky buttons. Korean lever is right below these. It does take a bit more time, and the Japanese lever, taking last place again. I swear it has redeeming traits, but this is one of the repeated movements can be kind of difficult. Okay, let's move on to the next technique. Keep it pushing. Everybody's favorite challenging technique, the electric wind god fist. I pasted some tips below. We're going to talk about that quickly, but if you don't know the input, let's talk about that first. Anytime you learn a new technique in Tekken, master the input. I say this in my Korean backdash guide. Forward. Oh, I have to switch controls to Reina. We're going to switch to Reina. I'm going to try to demonstrate this. All right. Every time you master a new technique, you need to understand what the inputs are. And the inputs for this are forward, neutral, down, down, forward, and 2 at the same time. If you cannot do that with your hands, I'm talking looking at this input history on the very far left here, over there. If you can't get this perfectly, then you should wait. It's okay if you do it too slow, but you want to nail this, right? And that's the biggest thing. People always ask me, I can't do electrics, I can't do electrics. And yes, it does take time to coordinate, but make sure you're doing it slow and actually doing the correct directions. The quick tip I have for trying to get electrics on pad, again, gripping with the right hand, relaxing with the left hand. Then when you're grinding it a bunch, these are your 2 points of feedback. If you get a down 2 like this, that means you hit your 2 button too early, right? Because we want to hit the diagonal. If you get a wind god fist, which is no electric, that means you hit it too late, right? So she won't say, Soria. She'll just say, say. See what I mean? Experiment with that, relax the left hand, and try alternating your timing between being too late and too early intentionally. Do your best to be too late on purpose, and then do your best to be too early on purpose, and slowly narrow that window. So that was too early, and that was perfect. It's going to be the same for the player 2 side, and on the pad, all that changes is probably which part of the thumb you hit it with. So you can hit with the base of your thumb here, and here you probably got to hit with the tip of your thumb, right? One other tip that for some reason has worked for generations of Tekken, if you imagine hitting down and triangle at the same time, or down and 2 at the same time, not the down forward, but down, something about how most brains work seems to make that line up. I don't know why that is, but since Tekken Tag 2 and Tekken 6, when I started like experimenting with this technique, that was the advice I got, and it worked for me. Now, something cool about the hitbox, the leverless, is that you can more physically tell whether you're hitting everything at the same time, right? Forward, neutral, down, down, forward, and 2 need to come at the same time. So you can feel if your hand is coming and hitting all the buttons at the same time. And that's something to really pay attention to. Go slow, don't go fast, like really coordinate this really intentional slow movement. It's not going to look right on screen, but you know the inputs are correct, right? And then going fast is trivial after you can go slow, right? Sweet. On the arcade stick, this is where Tekken originated. It is a bit harder, but I think the tips for the pad electric remain the same. You can experiment with going too early, too late, and shrinking the window, and you can imagine hitting down and 2 at the same time. So for me, it's actually making me fail. But on the player 2 side, for some reason, I think that tip actually does help me. Let's see. Yeah, on the player 2 side, I tend to be late. So I imagine hitting the down and 2 at the same time. I don't know why. Let's do the Korean lever. Just for completeness, it's not going to be the... I mean, it's going to be pretty similar to the Japanese lever. But let's demonstrate. Same thing. Something that's different about the Korean lever in general, just in case you don't know, is that there is no restrictor gate. So the corners are a bit harder to feel. That does make the circular part of the movement easier, but finding the diagonal can take some time. So if you're switching to Korean lever, it's okay to struggle a little bit at first. You got to get really familiar with where the corner is on your specific lever. Sweet, that was the electric. I know you're going to get a lot of questions in the comments. There will eventually be an electric guide, but take these tips. I promise you, if you go slow, listen to your input device if it makes noise, or really feel where the corners are, and experiment with that like shrinking window method. Too late, too early, shrink the window. You'll be surprised, and give it time. It takes a lot of time. Next technique, the Wavedash. Very, very fun technique. I have a few tips for learning it here. I'm going to demonstrate it on pad first because I'm actually really bad at it on pad, right? I can't do multiple wave dashes. So how I would practice it is just doing 2 at once. First, you want to nail the movement in the first place. Don't even try it if you can't crouch dash 1 time. But do it twice. Then you can add a third. Right? I can't add a third yet. It's going to take time to learn. Go slow, relax the left hand. Don't try and overexert it and injure yourself or learn it wrong. The worst thing you can do is learn it wrong and then have to reprogram it, right? Oh, tier list for the electric. Thank you, chat. Chat coming in clutch today. Tier list for the electric. It's going to be hitbox on top for sure because you can feel the precision. And then honestly, I would put all of these at about the same. About the same difficulty. Make sense? I don't think that needs more elaboration. Although the Xbox pad, because it has this extra click, for some reason, it does feel a bit easier, actually. You can actually tell where the corner is really nicely. So just for the sake of separation, I'll do this right here. We'll put everything, the hitbox on top, Xbox pad right below, and then the rest of these are about the same. Specifically for electrics. For the sake of your screenshot, let me change that. This is Electric Wind Godfist. Screenshot time. Let's go to the next technique. Thank you, chat, for reminding me. You guys are being helpful today. I love it. Wavedashing. I said I was going to do it on pad first. I felt like picking up the arcade stick. On the Japanese lever, again, you have a spring that is not as helpful as the Korean rubber. So you do have to be really gentle in order to get the inputs to return to neutral quickly. If you don't know the Wavedash input, it's basically what we did for the electric, but you hit a forward at the end and then reset. So it becomes like forward, QCF, UCF, right? Wait, I'm lying. There's an extra forward. You use the forward to cancel the previous one. Like this. And then when you do it fast, it looks like that. There's a lot of guides out there. They can teach you a bit better. I just want to talk about the input device. And again, with this spring being not as bouncy, and with you having to use your whole hand, it's a bit tougher to do. The right side is honestly a lot easier. That's why you see a lot of Mishima players, main player 2 side. Main man is a great example. He's a Japanese stick player, unless he's switched in recent times. I know at the time that I was studying him, he was a Japanese stick player. And this motion is very, very comfortable, coordinating all your fingers to get the wave dash out. I missed the parenthesis there. That looks weird. Okay. Korean lever is where the wave dash really shines. Because of that rubber tension, because of the need to hit neutral, you can go super fast on these things. Korean levers are amazing for doing wave dashes. Even on the player 1 side, right? Obviously, using the entire hand is a bit slower. And again, not introducing too much tension in your shoulder or wrist is going to make this naturally a bit slower when you're not using all your fingers, right? But it's still very, very comfortable. If you're a Mishima player, I would consider getting a Korean lever. It's not essential, but it's pretty nice. Now, where was I? I was talking about learning this on pad. When you're learning the wave dash, light tension in the hand, and just try doing 2 at once. And do it really cleanly. Don't do it like super sloppy, right? Like getting the inputs everywhere. Oh, I got it, right? No. Try and keep it as clean as possible. And then you can slowly build up from 1 wave dash to 2 to 3, etc. And don't rush it, right? I'm going to try to rush it for this video, and you'll see I probably won't get it, right? So it's a slow process, but the more relaxed you do it and the more reps you do, the better it'll be in the long run. The way muscle memory works is you usually learn it in the time off. So do it for like 5 minutes, take a break and leave and come back. Don't spam like 30 minutes straight of it. Like it's really easy to burn out and not actually learn much. So yeah, stack 2 at a time, build up to 3, drop the controller on the ground. Xbox pad is actually kind of nice for Wavedash, even though it doesn't seem that way, because you can feel each direction. So I can feel if I'm doing that QCF, and I can feel when I'm canceling it with forward. And because of that precision, I can really tell when I need to do each cancel. I'm still not coordinated enough to do 3 straight, but that's the method I would use to learn it at full proficiency. The leverless is going to be almost the same, but there are some specific tricks to learning it. So if you want like a quick cheat code, this is what like a full speed wave dash looks like on the player 1 side. You use your left hand to hit the QCF, the right hand to cancel the forward, and then you string them together. When you're learning this the first time, don't rush into it like this and try to go as fast as possible, because your hands won't learn the input. It's just going to be like noodles slapping your controller. Go slow, learn the input, stay relaxed. I also recommend learning it the normal way, because building up your left-hand coordination is going to be essential when you're learning to play on leverless. And on the player 2 side, I don't know of any really nice shortcuts that actually help. It's just going to be a matter of building up that ring finger dexterity. If you don't know, these 2 fingers share a tendon, so it's really hard to coordinate them separately. But with a lot of relaxed practice and a lot of breaks, you can do it. It's very possible. Tier list for the wave dash. I think the hitbox falls a bit short because even though the player 1 is really easy, it takes a bit to learn on the player 2 side. I actually think the levers are on top here. Even though the Japanese stick is a bit more difficult, I think the levers are very intuitive for wave dashing. All you have to do is master not using too much hand force on the player 1 side, and it goes pretty smoothly. Some people upgrade their springs or their rubbers to get a bit more tension, but personally, I like keeping it as light as possible, again, to avoid injury. We're doing pretty good. We're like halfway there. This is where we get into a bit more character-specific techniques. Let's talk about instant while standing or instant while rising. This is a Mishima technique. I threw my controller off the cliff. How fitting. This is a Mishima technique, or any character with a crouch dash that's like the Mishimas. I'm going to pick Devil Jin and try to demonstrate this. This is less of a controller technique and more of a timing technique. How it works is you do a crouch dash, and if you press back at the right time, they are put in a crouching state. So if I just do a crouch dash 2, I get this Wind God Fist, right? If I do it really late, I get this while standing 2, right? But if I do a normal CD2, crouch dash 2, it looks like this. But if I tap back at the right time, he does this while standing 2 instantly. The trick is you look for when his rear leg will kind of stutter. There are videos demonstrating this on YouTube that provide it in slow motion. But when that leg stutters, you tap back and you hit your, while standing button to get it to work. And again, because it's more of a timing technique than like a speed technique or a coordination technique, it's just straight timing of the game, and it's actually pretty slow relative to the other techniques. I think every device is going to be more or less equal here. As long as you're comfortable hitting your directions, which very clearly I am not, it should be pretty straightforward. That said, remember how I mentioned that the Xbox, it's a bit harder to move your thumb across the entire span of the D-pad? I have to use the tip of my thumb to crouch dash and then use the base of my thumb to hit the back input. Little quirk of the device itself and my hand size. Key part in learning this is, again, light tension in the left hand. I'm going to be saying that the whole video. I hope you're not tired of it yet. And then it's going to be the reverse here. I'm using the base of my thumb to hit this quarter circle, and then using the tip to hit back. Make sense? Yeah, one more time. Sweet. Let's check it out on the leverless. Exact same thing conceptually. Oh, I hit the wrong button. That's crazy. Exact same thing conceptually, but again, we have that tactile feedback that makes it a bit easier to tell when you're hitting everything at the same time. And the way the buttons click gives us an auditory cue and a physical cue for whether or not we've got the timing down. And that can be really helpful to know when you've done it right. On the stick, I hit an accidental up back. That's why I got the misinput there. But it's going to be pretty much the same. With the rest of these techniques, it's going to be a lot of how comfortable are you on your controller. I lied. It's not with the rest of these techniques. There are some fucked up techniques down here. But these ones, pretty decent. This one, mostly timing, not a lot of coordination. On the player 2 side, you'll use your fingers to do the wave dash, and then you'll tap back with the meat of your hand here. Ugh. A lot of good reps here. And then Korean lever is going to look pretty similar. Because of the rubber bouncing back to neutral, it takes a bit less effort. And you could do it what feels faster, even though it's on a really similar timing. The rubber will bring the stick back to neutral, and then you just tap it lightly to get the last input. Wonderful. Wonderful. Tier list for instant while standing. It's all about the same. It's really all about the same. Xbox is maybe a little bit harder, but it's all about the same, right? It's the size of the D-pad. That's the main problem. More specific techniques. This is not a wave dash. This is called a snake dash. And the reason it's called that is because some characters have a different crouch dash. It's not that dragon punch motion, that DP motion that we're familiar with. I'm going to pick Brian here. They use a QCF motion, quarter circle forward. And out of this, you can tap up to cancel it with a sidestep. So the proper technique to snake dash is you'll tap up and then back so that you block instead of sidestepping. And on most devices, it's actually pretty straightforward if you're really coordinated. Again, light tension in the hand. And you can string together these QCFs and these tap ups pretty nicely. Oh, scene. Good catch, y'all. What did I just say? QCF, tap up to cancel sidestep. Right? That's what that looks like. But we tap back so that we don't sidestep. We just tap up and then back. And that way we jump backwards. That way we cancel the crouch dash without actually moving and sidestepping. Because sometimes you don't want to sidestep, you want to block. On the PS5 pad, you see I'm kind of struggling. I think that's a coordination issue. I think that if you play on the pad regularly, you can move between these inputs pretty fluidly. I don't think it's pretty difficult. Player 2 side, it's going to be pretty similar. The nice part about these pads is that player 1 and player 2 are generally symmetric. Like, yes, the motion is slightly different, but you're still using your thumb. You're not, like, losing access to different fingers like you would on a lever or an arcade stick. Xbox pad, I actually like this a lot, and it's because of the clickiness. I can tell when I'm tapping up, and I can tell when I'm tapping back, so I get really fast cancels. The QCF is actually also really nice, too, to enter and to input, because I can tell each direction is coming out. So the more I played on the Xbox pad, the more I enjoyed it. I really didn't think that would be the case. On the Razer Kitsune, leverless controller, or keyboard if you're playing on that, this is actually really comfortable too. It's actually, one risk on the leverless is you can go too fast. That's a problem I found. Because you can hit every input so quickly, you could go nowhere like this. But Brian needs to let the QCF sit a bit before he taps up. If you do it too fast, it just looks like this. You're just sidestepping, right? So let the QCF rock, tap up and then back. If you see my inputs on the far left, I let there be some air. I take a breath between the QCF and the up back. And you can chain these together with a bit more coordination. The player 2 side is also really nice on this. Even though QCF motions are a bit more weird with that ring finger issue, the thumb still controls the up. So that part of the movement doesn't really change. You do your QCF, and then you hit your thumb in the opposite direction button to block. So the leverless is pretty nice if you're going to play Brian or another character. It also helps with the backdash, because they have a back sway if you mess it up. So having a clean backdash on the leverless is also a bit easier. So if you play Brian, Paul, Nina, or any character with a sway, leverless is something to consider. Snake dashing on a Japanese stick. QCF up. Oh, wrong side. QCF up. QCF up. It's a bit awkward, I'm not going to lie to you. Because my thumb has to do multiple things. It has to tap up and then tap back. If I want to not do that, I'd have to tap up with my thumb and then hold back with the rest of my fingers. And that's kind of awkward. So an alternate solution is just kind of churning it. But that's not very precise. You would have to spend a lot of time practicing this, probably to the degree that you practice like electric. Maybe a little less because you're not using your right hand. But it is a very coordinated movement. On the player 2 side, it's going to be a bit easier. Because we have all these fingers recruited to work together. So all these fingers can do the quarter circle, the thumb can tap up, and the meat of the hand can tap back. So on the player 2 side, this is pretty nice. Kind of like how the Wavedash is a bit easier on the player 2 side. Korean lever is going to be pretty similar. But we have the rubber helping us out, right? That means we can kind of let go of the stick and then tap up and back in one fluid motion. We don't have to really guide it back to neutral like we do with the Japanese stick. So I find this actually really comfortable on the Korean lever. I kind of QCF, release, and then tap up back. Right? And then if I were good, I could string a bunch of these together and have like a pseudo wave dash, which is kind of fun. Nice. Quick tier list for the snake dash. I like the Korean lever a lot. I think the Japanese lever is really hard. The pads are a bit difficult. The Kitsune is really nice. Pretty straightforward, right? Swapping the scene back early this time. Not make the same mistake. Let's talk about another related technique, instant while standing. So if you're a snake dash character, you have a QCF crouch dash. You have access to instant while standing in a different way than the Mishimas did. So with the Mishimas, we had to tap back. But with these QCF characters, you just have to hit down, down, forward, and skip the forward. Don't tap forward. I'll show you what happens when you do. On Fang, if you do it perfectly, down, down, forward, you get this really quick punch. This is his while rising one, while standing one. And it's so nice because it covers so much space, right? You can use it to approach instantly. Look at that. That's what happens if you mess up, though. Success is this quick punch. Failure, QCF1, where you hit the forward, is this big, low, reactable shoulder. We don't want that. We want this quick one, right? So what this is helping to show immediately is how hard this is on the Korean lever. On the Korean lever, there's no restrictor gate. Everything is like basically a circle. If you're a technical Korean lever user, you'll know I'm lying to you. It's a squared circle. That doesn't matter. It's basically a circle, and that makes it so easy to just hit forward on accident. And skipping neutral sometimes involves hitting down again. Or skipping the forward, sorry. Skipping the forward means sometimes hitting down again. You look at my input history, I'm hitting down just to avoid that forward. This problem does... Oh, let me check the player 2 side real quick. On the player 2 side, it's a similar thing, but again, with more fingers to coordinate the movement, it's less of an issue. You can kind of guide your fingers back to that corner and just let go. And there's no risk of hitting that full QCF motion. On a Japanese stick. Whew. It is a similar issue, not very different. It's very easy. Actually, on a Japanese stick, it's way easier depending on the gate you have. So if you have like an octagonal or circular gate, you might have the same problem as the Korean lever. But the default Japanese stick has a square gate, right? Which tells you exactly where this corner is. I'm wiggling, and I'm still in the corner. Because of that, I can just stop at that corner and release. And the spring will take me straight back to neutral to get this instant while standing one. There's other techniques you can do also out of instant while standing. But the main one for Fang, at least, is this one. Other characters have different ones. Again, it's if you have a quarter circle forward crouch dash. Player 2 side's a similar story. Just dig into that corner and then release. But I think leverless is also amazing for this. Because you have discrete buttons for down and forward, it's very easy to tell when you're letting go. So all you have to do is make sure you release that forward before you release the down. And it's almost impossible to mess it up. If you go too fast, you'll mess it up. But that's like with all techniques. Don't go too fast, go slow. And light tension in the left hand. Make sense? I messed up on the last one. On the pads, I actually enjoy it here too. A lot of American players who play crouch dash characters like this play on pad. And it's just a matter of, again, digging into that corner and avoiding hitting forward at all costs. I kind of slide it straight down. Like that. Player 2 side. This might be a bit tougher. But it's going to be same in concept. Go slow, no tension in the hands. Succeed. Xbox pad, 2 clicks, which is really nice. I can hear the down click and the left click, and then release. If I hear a third click, where I'm releasing the down, it's a bit easier to tell I messed up. So that little extra feedback, I think, makes this better than the PlayStation pad for this specific technique. Pretty neat, right? Instant while standing. The sticks are noticeably worse than the Kitsune. This pad is actually about the same, and maybe you can make an argument that the Xbox pad is the best of the lower tier ones. But by far, the Kitsune stands up above. Leverless is so precise for these specific movements. I really, really enjoy it. You might be wondering at this point, why not get a leverless? And I'm going to talk about that a bit later. But we still have, what, one last technique to get to? I lied. We have the character-specific techniques. There are 3 of them. I'm not going to go into these in too much detail because they are kind of super nerdy. But I thought it was worth covering in case you're a diehard Tekken fan and you're trying to decide, should I switch my input device? Should I play something else entirely? And this will help you decide that. I'm going to pick Brian. You could see that I had notes for which characters to put on both sides. It actually doesn't matter who's on the other side. I thought I was going to demonstrate on both sides, but I figured it's easier to just go straight forward. Brian has some full crouch moves like this one, Northern Cross, and his 13 frame punish. Full crouch down forward 2-1. Normally, you have to wait a bit in crouch before you can trigger these. If you go too soon, he just kicks down like this. But because he has a snake dash, you can do down, down, forward to crouch dash, cancel it with down, back, and then hit down, forward again. And if you do it fast enough, you get what we call an instant northern cross, instant full crouch. Specific technique, really nice on Korean lever, surprisingly. I tried a couple times on Japanese lever here. Also nice because the corners are well defined. On this DS5 pad, I think I'm going to struggle. Getting across to both diagonals with my whole thumb without like tensing up my entire hand is really hard. So I'm barely kind of getting it here, but I don't even think that's worth it. So I'm going to say on the pad, this is like not unviable, but so demanding and uncomfortable that it's definitely a bottom tier input. So Brian player or Lily has some combos like this too. Very, very specific technique. On the leverless, it's like kind of trivial. You just kind of hit down, down, forward, down, back, down, forward. Very nice. And on the leverless, it's going to be similar on both sides, which is also really nice. Actually, on the levers too, it's going to be similar on both sides because your main fingers are yanking down and your wrist is doing all this transitioning. So when you're doing it on the other side, it's a different wrist movement, but your fingers are still pulling down, right? So you'll have to train that part in reverse, but you're basically just gripping down and wiggling. Like, for lack of a better description, that's basically what's happening. Chat actually made a great contribution. We're going to talk about Law's slide as well. Law's slide. Down, down, forward, down, down, forward. Technically, you could say, like, full crouch, down, forward, down, down, forward. But yes. The other technique that's really cool is Nina's Hayashida step. If you've been sticking around this long, by the way, thank you. Please leave a like if you're enjoying this. Leave a comment if you wish I talked about a different technique that I didn't talk about. I'm sorry I left it out. Hayashida step is a cool Nina technique where you do a quarter circle back to back sway and you tap up to cancel it. So as you can see, if you tap up and cancel in a weird rhythm, it doesn't look like a lot. But let me show you what it looks like on leverless. Because leverless has a dedicated up button on the thumb, it's really easy to do any rhythm you want of the Hayashida step with very, very little restriction. So if I do a longer QCF, it's like a super powered backdash. If I cancel quicker, it could be like a pseudo sidestep. It evades mids. It evades... somebody said in the chat that it can auto block some lows. I think that depends on the timing you do it at. But it's easy to do on both sides with leverless because you have your thumb hitting up and the QCF motion doing here. Your left hand doing the QCF motion. That was really poor English for that. On the pads, you're going to kind of have to churn it, right? I can't even do it. I'm not even going to pretend that I know how to do it. Actually, that was pretty decent. Doing it without jumping is pretty hard. And I wouldn't say it's an essential Nina technique, but it is really powerful. So if you play on pad, keep that light tension. Maybe you can rotate your controller a bit so that you don't have to move your thumb all the way up, right? Maybe you can rotate your controller like this. Experiment with a few different hand positions. I'm sure a Nina expert could actually help you. But Nina's a very technical character. I'm not a technical Tekken player. I use my mouth, not my hands. To explain the game, okay? Xbox pad. This one's actually kind of nice. Because if you put your thumb straight in the middle, you can actually do these quarter circle movements really cleanly. So Xbox pad, you can kind of just churn it. It's pretty sweet. Let's try it on the other side. Right? It's not perfect. It's actually very far from perfect. But it's certainly more comfortable than the PS5 pad and is almost kind of similar to the leverless. Just because of the clickiness. I'm tangled. All my cables are tangled. On the Korean lever. Check this out. You can kind of churn it. It doesn't take a lot of precision. I thought this would be really difficult. But on the Korean lever, I can kind of just churn the stick and get decent results. With a bit more practice and a bit more precision, I could definitely get a clean Hayashida step. But look at how fast I'm going just by churning. And I think the reason is the Korean stick having a bit more neutral makes it easier to jump between the inputs. So that's something to consider. Korean lever is actually kind of nice for this repeated motion. I'm really failing here. And I recommend if you're actually going to learn Nina, practice slowly. Don't do what I'm doing, okay? But I already know Nina's too technical. So I'm going to skip her for that. PhiDX. PhiDX, this one is really, really fun. This is Master Raven's not in this game. This is Raven's specific crouch dash in this game. Raven has a specific crouch dash. Even though he has a QCF crouch dash, his functions differently. I'm not going to explain all the technical details because there are other guides that do it better. But basically, if you do down, down, forward, down over and over again, he can do like a wave dash. And he can like speed it up. He could like double wave dash. There's a lot of like technical Raven players that if you watch their replays, they're doing this. Hayes in America is doing this. Pina obviously in Japan is doing this. Immortal X Soul, I think from EU. It's not brand new, but it definitely got popularized by Pina after his great performance in Tekken 7 throughout the world. I find it a lot easier on the Xbox pad because of the clickiness. I know exactly where my thumb is going, and I can get closer to doing this wave dash. I'll link some guides below to do this better than I'm doing it here. Leverless, similarly, is really nice for this technique because you can time it very precisely. And if you look at the input history, you can very quickly troubleshoot how to do the input better. I'm going to backdash. Right? It looks ugly. You can do it faster. You can do it slower. Raven experts, study up. The cool part is I'm pretty sure as Raven, you could learn to do this on any input device. I actually find it decently doable on lever, which is kind of cool because I expected this kind of technique. Remember how the instant while standing was kind of hard because you had to skip the forward? Well, for some reason, the repeated motion of this, once you get it really comfortable, is kind of nice. Again, I'm not doing it very clean. I'm not doing it very fast, but I'm on the way. If I were to learn Raven, I would be pretty close. Just for completeness, the Korean lever. But this is probably the one technique that I think is pretty equally doable on every input device eventually. Right? I think that with enough practice, with a relaxed hand, and just a really slow approach, you can eventually get it. The key to all of these is getting really clean input histories. So like you want to find a video, hopefully this one, that explains the exact input and how it's done. Not just general hand motions, not just little tricks, but what does the game register? Copying what the game registers and then repeating that slowly. That's the trick to learning any kind of execution. In Tekken, at least. Last thing we should talk about is Law's slide. Shaheen has this, and Lee has this as well. Lee's a popular character, so why not? Let's pick Lee. I swear he screams as much as Law in this game, though, so is it really that different? When you go into crouch, by hitting down, forward, down, down, forward, they do this little extra big slide step. You see what he did there? There, big slide step. If you hit 3, he slides. You can get really fast at this so that as soon as you could barely see the opponent crouch and they slide. I'm not a Lee expert, I'm not a Law expert, but I already can tell on the Xbox pad, the clickiness of the pad is nice. So if I grip with my right hand, kind of press down just with my base of my thumb and lightly use my wrist to kind of move this, I can get pretty fast. Player 2 side. Oh, that's a bit harder. That's a bit weird. So it's reversed. I'm not pushing forward with my thumb. I'm going backwards. It gets a little blue shine, I think, if you do the perfect input. So I already am kind of struggling with this on pad. On the PS5 pad, it's a bit easier, though. And I think that's probably because it's so soft and lenient. Like, it's really easy to just put my thumb here and just wiggle a bit and get my slide. So it's not as precise, but it gets the job done. And I think that's probably a good summary for the PS5 pad. Not as precise, gets the job done. So it's serviceable for both the backdash and the slide movement, but that's something to consider. Once again, we're going to come to the lever list, which is going to be amazing for this technique. If I can even do it. I actually didn't warm this one up. I didn't think that I would need to cover this, but I think it's actually a good idea to cover. Because you're hitting buttons, again, you can really just tell when each input is coming out. It's really easy to link that input history on the far left, on the far left here, with what sound your ears are taking in and the feedback your hands are feeling. And when you have that, it's really, really easier, I think, to develop good execution. Japanese stick kind of falls short here. With the spring being so weak, you kind of have to manually move it back and forth. Right? And that's kind of tough. It's hard to go really fast. It's not impossible, especially, again, with a relaxed hand. You can pull it off. But when you're moving around doing all of this and then trying to get to it, it's possible to mess up for sure. Korean lever. Slightly similar issue, but again, that rubber returning to neutral a bit faster, I think still makes it a bit easier. I'm not a Lee expert or a slide expert, so I'm not going to be moving around cleanly, getting in slide, and instantly doing it. But if you are a person who plays this, probably only the Xbox pad is kind of hard. The rest are pretty doable. Wow, we made it all the way to the end. Tier list for the special techniques is going to be a little different, right? We had instant full crouch, so let's do this first. Instant full crouch, really, really easy on the levers and the leverless, really, really awkward on the pads. That's really hard to get around. Hayashida step. Easy to churn on the Korean lever, really, really easy on the hitbox. It's like in a tier of its own. Awkward on pad and Japanese stick. Not impossible, just awkward. Pina dash, I think is pretty doable on every input device with good practice and clean inputs. Law's slide, Japanese stick falls a bit lower. Was I doing it on the... Yeah, this was hard going this way. There's no springiness helping me get back to the down input. It's kind of like the Japanese stick. Looking at the slide here. It's kind of like the Japanese stick, where I have to get it all the way back to the neutral position manually. It doesn't feel like it's going to bounce back by itself. So I'm going to lower the Xbox pad for Lee, Law, and Shaheen's slide. It's about here. So those were all the Tekken techniques. What is my final conclusion? What are my final conclusions about the best devices? Let me pull up all of these techniques we went through really quick. If you stuck around this long, I really do appreciate it. And I hope this was helpful. I generally don't like making videos that are this long, but I thought that it would be useful to go through and kind of answer everybody's questions about every input device and every little Tekken technique that kind of makes the game tick and that you might be interested in when you're planning what controller you want to buy. So obviously, it's going to depend on your character, right? Does your character have a Mishima Wavedash or a Snake Dash? And does your character have these ridiculous extra techniques that not every character has, right? So this is kind of the rundown of the main moves. Let me close all this and then you can actually see all of them. This is Nina. And this is Raven. And then we have Law's slide. Okay? These are all the techniques. And here we go. Look at that. Doing it on the fly. These are all the techniques. Which controller is the best? The Xbox pad was surprisingly nice in most of these. Only reason I don't like it is moving forward and back and changing directions, right? There's a big gap to cover here, right? It's kind of exhausting. Aside from that, executing all the minute details is really, really nice. And that's kind of my conclusion with the Kitsune as well. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but amongst a lot of pro players, we talk about hitbox people who move, and they have really crisp movement, right? Really clean sidestep cancels, really clean backdash cancels. But sometimes it feels like they just stop for a split second before they resume their next movement. And I think what that is again, it's so easy to just cancel your movement quickly with these autopilot movements, right? With the Wavedash, it was like this two-hand movement, and then with the backdash, you could do it like this. So when you want to switch back to neutral or change your movements, there's like stopping that momentum to do something else. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that exaggerated. And if you're a beginner just getting into Tekken, really not a big deal. But it's something to consider. Tekken is a game where movement is very fluid, has a lot of neutral inputs, and you modify your spacing a lot to change your timing, change what attacks are threats. And for me, precise spacing is crucial to the Tekken experience. So You can do almost every technique really, really cleanly with this leverless controller. But the fluidity of the movement is why I personally will not switch to this compared to my Korean arcade stick. Korean arcade stick, the ability to return to neutral really quickly and change directions really fast is so valuable to me. So I'm a movement heavy player. I really enjoy this. I don't prefer heavy execution. So for me, this is the device to go with. While I'm here, let me talk a little bit about the Quanba Titan. I love this thing. It's so small. It's so portable. The cable door isn't like a door that can come off. It's just a little drawer. And it's so simple and so efficient. I just fold up the cable and stuff it in. Right? It's so much faster to get off stage by just grabbing the whole cable, walking back to a chair or something, and then stuffing it in this drawer. Right? It's so much simpler. So this would be my dream controller if not for the fact that I had to modify it just to fit the stick in. On top of that, I love this wide spacing. I think it's more ergonomic to keep my shoulders more even, but it's too wide. I never thought I would say that. The spacing is too wide that I have to relearn my muscle memory. And if for some reason I don't have access to another stick, like say this stick breaks, I'd have to transfer over this hot glued 3D printed base. I'd have to get my other lever into there, and it's just so much work. So I love this. It's so close to being perfect. If I didn't have to modify it, and if the spacing were a bit closer, this would probably be my go-to stick. But unfortunately, those two things are deal breakers. And I really love just this simple cable drawer. It's hard to overstate how much I value that. Because I talked about this briefly in the beginning. When I have the Obsidian 2, this is such a quality product. I really enjoy everything about it, except the cable door. When I screwed this door back in for the first time in here, I pinched the cable. I pinched the cable on these studs because if you don't wrap it back perfectly, which honestly takes me about like 2 minutes, you can like pinch the cable. It's such a hassle. I really don't like it. I did talk to Book, pro Tekken player and Street Fighter player from Thailand, and he said the process of screwing it on kind of lets him calm down, breathe before a set, or recollect his thoughts after a set, which I think is a valid opinion and a valid way to look at it. But for me, a tournament is so hectic. I'm always concerned about my belongings. I don't want to spend like 30 seconds trying to get this thing back on and then forgetting something at the tournament setup, right? So amazing, amazing device. Everything is well laid out. It's easy to modify. This cable door is a deal breaker for me. And I think that basically covers my opinions on all these input devices. If I were to start up Tekken today, I don't know which one I'd pick. So for reference, I'm using a modified Quanba Obsidian 1. And the only thing I don't like about this is it has this whack cable door. My cable door has stayed intact because I don't pinch it closed. Down here. I just close it lightly. Right? But this cable door is known to break. Many people have broken it. And I had to install like mouse pads on the bottom for grip. The other sticks, like in the modern day, all of these arcade sticks have perfect rubber grips on the bottom. The Obsidian was bad, so I bought Amazon mouse pads and glued them to the bottom. It's not my favorite, but it's very lightweight. The cable door is not in the way, and it does everything I need it to do, right? So, long-winded speech. Will I be upgrading? Hard to say, but I hope that you can make a more informed decision, whether you go with Xbox pad, PS5 pad, leverless controller. This is the Razer Kitsune. Again, thanks to Razer for sending it to me. Sorry for punching the mic. Junk Food Arcades also makes the Snackbox Micro. I didn't demonstrate techniques on it, but this is a size comparison. Hopefully that helps you make your decision. Is that better? I know the text box is in the way. And that's that. Hopefully this is helpful, you guys. I know it was a long video. Thanks for hanging out. Lee just stomped on Reyna. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.